our job as artists is to expose, not to mask. And when you expose, none of us are politically correct. I'm telling you, if there's one thing that we've learned with social media and Facebook or whatever, is how extremely flawed we are as human beings.
You picked up the Golden Globe. I hope you bring it with you today so we can pass it around the audience. It's okay.
No, I'm good with it now.
It's had a little time to sink in. How do you feel winning that, especially for a film like this? What's your thoughts now, a few days on?
It feels good. You know, I always feel like it's not my style to kind of carry a win past the first hour. It's like I take a picture with the statue, I kiss the statue, people congratulate me, then I'm good.
Right. There's something special there, I think, about winning that, particularly for this project, especially
Absolutely.
with your long history with it, and there's something very special about.
Well, the big reward and award for me is the fact that it made it to the screen. It was a vision of August Wilson's for 35 years. And, you know, he's up there with the greats, the Eugene O'Neills, the Tennessee Williams, you know, the Edward Albees, the Arthur Millers, but he is relatively obscure.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's been exposed to a wider audience, and the fact that Denzel, I think, did a stupendous job is really reward enough.
Yeah. A little bit more about the play, because I'd kind of like to hear a bit more about your history with it. So, Pulitzer Prize-winning plays, Fence's the sixth play in August Wilson's 10-part century cycle. So every decade he's written.
Every decade.
This
He calls it the American century cycle, actually.
Incredible thing. And we've had a fantastic performance of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom Next Door.
Yes.
Which was a hit,
Mm-hmm.
a massive hit. So I thought this was an interesting detail that Norman Jewison wanted to direct the film in the 80s with Eddie Murphy, and August Wilson was like, no. Not going to happen. I want a black director. So, and Denzel is wanting to bring more of his work to the screen, I understand.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about, first of all, the stage from 2010, you working with Denzel. How did that come together, and your role as Rose? How did this all happen, effectively?
Well, I wish it were a more dramatic story, but it really is, Scott Rudin is the kind of driving force behind a lot of it. He's produced just about all of August Wilson's plays on Broadway, and he asked me to play Rose, and I thought, oh my God, I gotta follow Mary Alice, who did it on stage with James Earl Jones and Courtney B. Vance, Frankie Faison. It was, you know, they just left their pee and their poop,
Okay.
you know, on it. I hate following performances. I always like doing new plays. And, but I decided, why not?
And was Denzel attached at that time?
Denzel was already attached.
Okay.
And I went into rehearsal, I remember in March 2010, I remember one of the first things Denzel said was, you know what? One of the things I remembered about the original production was Mary Alice's performance. I was like... But, so we did 114 performances on Broadway, and it was just a revelation. You know, it's a joy to be a part of this sort of narrative. And I always say, I know August says all of his plays are political, and they are. I mean, that's why he chronicles every decade in African American life. But what I love about it, what I don't get to do a lot, is you sit with their pathology.
Yeah.
You see them unravel. There's not one time that you feel like they're a social mouthpiece, that it's didactic. And a lot of times, that's what they do to actors of color. You sit there, and all the questions are about, so, what do you think Rose was actually saying?
Right.
I was like, she said what she actually was going to say. But so that's what I love. You're just watching these relationships unfold.
Yeah.
And you begin to see the universal in the specific.
Yeah.
So it was a joy to do on Broadway. Scott Rudin asked Denzel to do the film. Denzel read the script, and actually there was a script that August had written, a screenplay.
Oh, there was.
There was no Rose in the screenplay. She was not there.
Film about?
Alberta, I think you saw Alberta, and Lyons was not there. The role of Lyons, it just wasn't there because it was a script written for Eddie Murphy. So they took all of Lyons' lines and they gave it to Corey.
But how could it work without Rose? I can't imagine.
Well, that's what I say.
Right.
But he read it. He did think it was a bit of a mess because once again, you could tell. August had a lot of talking heads in his ear.
Right.
He said, let me do the play first. And that's probably the best decision he made. He said, let me do the play before I do the movie.
So what we're seeing now is the August Wilson play.
Basically, it's I think if August Wilson had 99 words, 98 of them made it in the play. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's the original cast except for Giovanna Depo and Sanaya Sidney.
So tell us a little bit about making a play in two ways, on stage, doing it on stage and doing it on film, and what the difference is. Very few plays get translated for screen, mostly novels. So it's quite interesting, I think, that thing around Raisin in the Sun, Lorraine Hansberry is one of the ones that we remember.
And you know what? That's always a difficult question because I always want to give you kind of the bullshit answer. Yeah. And but you just make it more intimate.
For the screen.
Absolutely. That's the only thing. On stage, you never saw the inside of the house. Yeah. As a matter of fact, when Bono says, Troy, you got to tell Rose about Alberta, and he says, I will, I'll tell, and Bono leaves, and then on stage, I come out of the house. Right. And Troy tells me. In the movie, he goes in the house and tells me. Right. So you see the house, which was a panic attack for me because now I got to cook. I had to do all that stage business. But the other side of it, and I don't know how to explain it, is I know film acting is supposed to be small. And I see it all the time. I've been doing this for 30 years, and you see actors, they're this close to you, and they're, you know what? You piss me off. And you're like, what? But it works great for film. They tell you to make everything small. The problem, and actors will always tell you this, acting is about problem solving. That's what it is. You take a situation and you're like, how am I going to make this work? Okay? Too many of these moments are big. You cannot make them small. Yeah. I guarantee you there's not one person in this room that has not had that big moment. Yeah. When I say that big moment in life, that moment where, the snot was coming out, maybe you had an argument with your spouse in the middle of the street, and you went to Nirvana place. Yeah. Like, you don't even remember it. If someone pointed it out to you, you're like, okay, I want to forget that moment. Yes. There's a lot of those moments in the play that are no holds barred, no vanity is left. You're fighting for your life, okay? So you couldn't do film acting with that. Right. You just couldn't. Yeah. It's just not going to work. If I'm in the backyard going, but I've been standing with you, Troy. I've been right there with you. It just doesn't work. Yeah. That's why that's a 4-page monologue. Yes. If it's a 4-page so it was making it more intimate, but also not reducing it. Right. Okay. And if that makes any sense, so it was difficult. Yeah. I remember at one point with Denzel, I did that scene. We did that scene because we had rehearsal, and I said, I'm gonna do film acting. And he came out. He's like, it's hard for me to admit I've been standing in the same place. And I said, well, I've been standing with you. And Denzel has a hard time. He does not have a good poker face. He may think he has a good poker face. He doesn't have a good poker face. So he just was like, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm shifting my performance, Denzel, for the screen. He said, okay. I said, because, I don't want to be too big. He said, well, do what you think is too big. And then we did it, and I was like, ah. And he listened, he said, I don't think that's too big.
Right. Well, exactly.
So it was negotiating,
Yes.
understanding that there are intimate moments, just those quiet moments
Yes.
where you're silent, all of that.
Yes.
But at the same time, not being married to that.
Yes. And that's the thing with theatre. Theatre is about big human drama. It's not about those kind of
Yeah, but you know,
kind of
even on
moments.
stage, you still have to be honest.
Yes.
No one is coming into the theater to not see a human experience.
Yeah.
I guarantee you those plays and those movies that you remember that are absolutely stamped in your memory are those moments where someone and something is exposed,
Yes.
you know? And if you're not risking anything, if you're not leaving anything on the floor, you know, then you're not doing anything.
Yes.
You know, it's more important to be honest than big or small.
Yes. Yes. And I think that exact moment that you're speaking of, what's quite interesting, there are a lot of internal rows. So, you know, you'll see Rose from behind at the kitchen sink, and you just see the shape of her shoulders a lot of the time, and you completely understand what this woman's holding. So there's this balance between these kind of very internalized moments and these extraordinary ground-shifting moments.
Well, I didn't want to play the Rose in that speech. I didn't want to play that. I didn't want to play the Rose that I, missed out on my dreams and my hopes. I think that there's not one person who hasn't been married for 18 years, 20 years, that if their husband came home and said, you know what, I'm leaving you for another woman, or blah, 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 that wouldn't have that speech in them.
Yes.
It's already in there.
Yes.
It's dormant.
Yes.
You may choose not to pay attention to it, all of that, but it's just part of the makeup. You may see her lost dreams in the gray of her hair,
Yes.
and the fact that it's not sleek, and the fact that her hands are hard, and her hips are a little bit more wide, and you see maybe the lines under her eyes more, but she's trying to make it work. Her life is still working for her. She's still finding purpose in there. I didn't want to beat anyone over the head with, oh, I'm miserable from the very moment I'm coming out. I just didn't want to do that.
And you were saying earlier a little bit about the whole idea around judgment and how there's something interesting where both Troy and Rose are incredibly compromised characters, and how you as an actress coming to it had to manage that in terms of making sure you didn't bring your own contemporary judgment to the role. Can you speak a bit to that?
Well, it's 1957. 1957 had the highest rate of alcoholism and depression in women. We were absolutely relegated to the kitchen. It's like, I'm forgetting her name. Betty Friedan said in The Feminine Mystique, she said that we hid our pain behind perfectly applied lipstick and wax floors. We smoked a lot. That's why a lot of women died of lung cancer. So she is a reflection and an extension of her time. And she is also an extension of one generation removed from slavery. She came from parents who would whoop your ass. They didn't give you a timeout. Your timeout was going to get that belt, that moment of you getting that belt so they can whoop your ass, so you wouldn't do whatever you did.
A moment of reflection,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A very specific generation and life. And by ignoring that and putting judgment on that, you're dishonoring the character. And, our job as artists is to expose, not to mask. And when you expose, none of us are politically correct.
Right.
I'm telling you, if there's one thing that we've learned with social media and Facebook or whatever, is how extremely flawed we are as human beings. It took time, and I'm not always there, but it took time for me to get to that part of feeling that resilience. It takes, I always say that you step up when you're forced to, when you have no other choice. And after the help, I was just done with the aprons. I mean, I really was. I was done with, and I was done with what I felt was a gag order on my humanity and my sexuality and my womanhood. And I was just done, you know? And that's when my husband and I started the production company. And there was something about my husband and I going in these rooms and fighting for these narratives that forced me to be that woman. It forced me because I had to find my voice. It's hard to find a voice when it's not in you.
Yes.
But through constantly doing it, I came to the fruition that there are specific narratives that I want for me, that would fulfill me as an artist, and I didn't apologize for it. That's as best as I could say.
Did you negotiate that with your sort of agent and the people that you work with? Did you say, listen, I'm done with the aprons or whatever, like there are certain roles that I won't be looking at now? And
Yeah, I had that conversation. I said, I'm done with the aprons. You know?
We need T-shirts that say, I'm done with the aprons. It's a great line.
Which really was instrumental in me taking Annalise Keating and How to Get Away with Murder, because I saw it as, listen, I know it's a soap opera. I get it. It's network television. I get all of that. But in the center of that narrative is someone who looks like me. And someone whose sexuality, whose pathology does not have boundaries based on her color. It's almost a redefinition of a dark-skinned black woman of 51. And I wanted to remain that way. I don't want her to be pigeonholed. I don't want to walk into an episode and go, Annalise wouldn't do that. I don't know what Annalise would do. I don't care if it's screwed up. I don't care if it's all over the place. At best, it could be a great failure in redefining who we are. That's what it could be, a great failure. People can look back and go, okay, well, at least it was done.
Yes.
You know?
In the very famous now Emmy speech you did last year, you had the line, the only difference between black women and the rest of the world are opportunities.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about this year. I was just saying to my friend Jen earlier, or Jen was saying to me, how this is going to be an interesting year because we've got Hidden Figures coming out with Octavia Spencer, Janelle Monáe, Taraji P. Henson,
Absolutely.
Naomi Harris in Moonlight, Thandie Newton in Westworld, Denai Guerrera. What's your thoughts on that now? What are your thoughts in terms of those opportunities for black women actors? Are you seeing it?
My interpretation of that are a lot of these women, because I know them. I know Taraji. I know Octavia. I know a lot of them. And what's happened is they became the change that they wanted to see. They're tired of it. So it's like Shonda Rhimes said when she accepted the Norman Lear Award at the Producers Guild Awards 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. She said she got the award and she said, I deserve this. At the podium, she said, I deserve this because I ask for what I want and I expect to get it. That's what's happening now. These black women are walking in the room and going, okay, no, we're not doing that. And you gotta pay us this amount of money. And then it's having a slow effect. But now, and this is just a bastardization of what I really want to say because I don't have time. Now, I always say my 3 famous lines to everyone, and now what? So after the Oscar nominations come out, you get your award or whatever, now what? What's going to be next year? Because this is just this year. That's all we're talking about.
Yes.
What's going to be next year?
Yes.
Year after that?
Yes. Yeah. And there's something about that longevity within career.
Absolutely, but we understand that we're the ones who are instrumental in the change.